It's the year 2000, and we're going to explore the Twin Towers, from the giant shopping mall beneath the towers to the high-end restaurant at the top, where you could see all of New York. So let's quickly start at ground level, or actually, even below that. That's where we can really understand what actually made its basement system so sophisticated. From levels B1 to B4, workers could park their cars. At peak capacity, over 2,000 vehicles could be stored underground. However, there weren't nearly enough parking spaces for everyone to leave their cars. For this reason, many chose to commute by subway, for which there was a stop conveniently located at the core of the North Tower. Here, employees could quickly take the elevator right to their offices or grab a quick morning brew from the mall above before their first meeting. However, most people entered the building through the main entrance. This was the lobby of the World Trade Center, a luxurious grand entrance reflecting the tower scale. But what exactly made this lobby so special, and how could it stand out in the most competitive city for skyscrapers? It all began with the architect chosen for the project. In 1962, Minoru Yamasaki was appointed to design the World Trade Center. The selection was made by David Rockefeller, who came up with the idea to build the World Trade Center to revitalize New York City. At first, the project was proposed for the Lower East Side of Manhattan, but it was later moved to the west side of Lower Manhattan, because otherwise, New York State wouldn't support the plan. With the location finally agreed on, Yamasaki began developing the design. In his first sketches, he even planned 3 towers before eventually settling on the idea of 2 80-story buildings. But he needed to make one more crucial change. To reach the required 10 million square feet of office space, the design was increased to 110 stories. And that's not all. The identical towers would have unusually narrow windows because of a small detail many people don't know. Yamasaki himself had a fear of heights. He believed many people felt the same way, so he chose slimmer windows to make the upper floors feel safer and less intimidating. Before working on the Twin Towers, Yamasaki designed the Dhahran International Airport in Saudi Arabia in 1959, one of the biggest projects of his career. But what truly shaped his work were his travels abroad in 1955, where his entire approach to architecture was transformed. This was reflected both in the World Trade Center's lobby and the Saudi airport terminals. For example, inside the towers, he included Gothic-style arches, an inspiration from European architecture. This made his designs filled with a visual delight, which was also expanded with more elements such as folded concrete and light-filled atriums. Another interesting detail about Yamasaki's designs was that they were drawn by hand, long before computer-aided design existed. So architects worked with drafting tables, pencils, and ink on large mylar sheets. But before any lines could be drawn, Yamasaki needed a responsible partner. This would be Leslie E. Robertson. He was the chief structural engineer for the Twin Towers. His job was making sure the towers were safe and able to withstand heavy winds. One of the ways he secured the massive structure was by having steel columns drilled 80 feet or 24 meters into deep bedrock. But it was a risky move, because after drilling so deep into the ground, flooding became a real threat from the nearby New York Harbor, which is exactly what happened in 1992, just a few decades after the towers were constructed. It is December 10th, and the nor'eastern winter storm is about to enter New York State. However, what happened next, only a few hours later, would leave the city in shock. Only half a mile away from the Twin Towers, located at the southern tip of Manhattan, the Battery Park reached a tide height never seen before. Throughout the next 2 days, New York saw the most damage in a while. So did the World Trade Center ever get flooded? Well, the tides in the park reached 8 feet or 3 meters. Just imagine if the water reached any higher. It could have jeopardized the entire foundation of the Twin Towers, but also the underground mall, which could easily fill with water. Over here, you could easily spend an entire day in the plaza, as it wasn't just your regular shopping experience. There were restaurants, art installations, and of course, good old retail brands. Some of the most popular destinations amongst consumers were Gap, Sephora, and Victoria's Secret, just to mention a few household staples. And the mall wasn't small either. 75 shops occupied close to 430,000 square feet or 40,000 square meters of retail space. making it by far the largest shopping center in New York City. And just in case you got hungry, there were 20 different food vendors to choose from. Combined, they were capable of serving over 150,000 customers on a daily basis. But what was the reason for this massive capacity, and was it really necessary? The people relying on the towers daily would result in only a few thousand potential customers. But the answer is a lot simpler than you might think, because the mall served as a point of access or transfer for subway lines A, C, and E, making it one of the business hubs in New York City. A perfect place for vendors to showcase their businesses. And if this wasn't enough, the mall also housed a Warner Bros. And a Disney merchandise store. Kids would stop in front of it, amazed by the life-size superheroes in the window. The reason why these mainly tourist-focused shops would even consider opening up here in the first place is that the towers were already quite popular amongst internationals, way before the 2000s. People came here even if they didn't work in the towers, just to feel the energy of the place. So it makes sense that a lot of tourists would shop for American souvenirs. But beneath all this energy was a hidden risk, a flood big enough to swallow the entire foundation. Could something like that really happen? Luckily, Robertson came up with a solution to prevent this. First, construction workers built a wall, which was 3 feet or 0.9 meters wide. Second, they filled the trench with a clay water mixture known as slurry. And here is what made this a genius move. The concrete, being heavier, sank while simultaneously pushing up the slurry, which could then be drained away. Then they repeated this process around the entire building, which created a watertight seal. Simultaneously, Robertson and his team had 47 more inner steel columns placed. This carried over half of the structure's weight, an estimated total mass of 500,000 tons per tower. An engineering masterpiece, to say the least. However, this wouldn't be enough to prevent the building from collapsing in case of a storm or heavy wind. For that reason, another 59 columns were placed per side, totaling 283 steel rods. Then, in the core of the structure were the elevators, breaking the world record for being the fastest at the time. But more on that later in the video. Just like the secret floors near the top of both towers, areas that left even most people inside asking what they were used for. But first, we're going to talk about the stairwell. 3 were constructed in case of emergency evacuations. But before you could go any further in the building, you would have to walk past the security desk, which was right at this point. And no, you aren't wrong, it looked exactly like a simple reception desk. But that was the entire point of this smart camouflage. Blending in as just a regular front desk, guards had a clear sight of everyone entering or exiting the building without visitors ever suspecting surveillance. Furthermore, right outside the towers, art pieces worth millions of dollars were installed for one simple reason, because it wasn't just the fear of heights that influenced Yamasaki's design. It was also his dedication to make the World Trade Center more friendly and inviting, a place to rest and gather your thoughts. So how exactly did he create this atmosphere? This was a 25-foot bronze artwork called The Sphere, designed by the German sculptor Fritz Koenig. Over here was another part of the collection, American visionary James Rosati's 23-foot ideogram. Getting back to the mall, however, there was one piece of equipment in the tower that was crucial for everyday life, no matter what you came for: elevators. The towers were divided into different zones. Each tower had around 99 elevators, all located in the central core of the building. From the main lobby, express elevators took people straight to the sky lobbies on the 44th and 78th floors without stopping. At the sky lobby, you switched to local elevators that only served the floors above. This design allowed the elevators to be stacked inside the same shafts. This saved a huge amount of space. Without it, the towers wouldn't have been able to reach 110 stories and still offer the required office space. Most people assume the elevators went straight from the ground to the 110th floor, but if the towers were built that way, there wouldn't have been enough space left for offices. The buildings would have been more like giant elevator shafts than workplaces. It could have moved tens of thousands of people every day through 2 of the tallest buildings in the world. So overall, this was one of the most advanced elevator systems of its time. With the elevator system explained, we can start at the bottom. The lower floors, from floor 1 up to floor 43, were mostly used as regular office space. It looked something like this. A typical office floor was one huge open room. There were small desks in lines, carpet on the floor, and bright lights above. The narrow windows wrapped all the way around the floor, giving the whole space a soft, even glow. The floors were enormous, almost an acre each, so entire departments worked together on a single level. At the center of every floor stood the core of the building, the elevators, stairwells, and restrooms. Everything else was open office space. For thousands of people, this was their everyday workplace. Most of the lower office floors were used by banks, insurance companies, and government agencies. Tenants included big firms like Bank of America and Fuji Bank, along with major insurance companies. Yet, these floors were nothing compared to what waited above. Now that we've explored the lower floors, it's time to move higher into the tower, to the sky lobbies, located on the 44th and 78th floors in both towers. These acted like transfer stations, where passengers switched from express elevators to local ones. The sky lobbies also had offices, and in the North Tower, there was even a small cafeteria-style restaurant called the Skydive Restaurant, mainly used by people who worked in the building. But this was only our first stop. The real secrets are higher up, and to reach them, we need to step back into the elevator. But before we go any further, take a look at the elevator buttons. In case you forgot, the towers officially had 110 floors. The highest floor was the roof itself, and in the North Tower, there was no public access to it, so it made sense that you don't see a button of it. But now you might notice something strange. Floors 108 and 109 are also missing, two of the highest floors in the entire building. Almost no one ever entered them, or even knew what was inside. These floors were never meant for the public, and when we get there, you'll see what was hidden inside. So how did the Twin Towers compare to the other iconic skyscrapers of their time? If we put them next to the Empire State Building, the difference becomes obvious immediately. Completed in 1931, it rises 1,250 feet to its roof and 1,454 feet with its spire, weighing roughly 365,000 tons and holding about 2.8 million square feet of space. The North Tower stood 1,368 feet tall. With its antenna, it reached 1,730 feet. It weighed about 500,000 tons and held over 5 million square feet of office space. That's almost 2 Empire State Buildings of usable space inside one tower. Now compare that to 432 Park Avenue. At 1,396 feet, it reaches almost the same height the North Tower once did. The tower weighs only about 200,000 tons and contains around 550,000 square feet of space. That's less than a quarter of the Empire State Building and only a small fraction of the North Tower. For now, we're in the middle of the building, in the zone that sits between the two sky lobbies. These levels were home to big companies, trading firms, and international businesses. The higher you went, the more valuable the space became, not because the rooms changed much, but because the views did. There's no public record of exact prices, but it's believed that renting an entire floor could cost millions of dollars per year. Both towers had similar layouts, but the tenants were not always the same. The North Tower had more government agencies and financial firms, while the South Tower had a mix of tech companies, trading floors, and private offices. Although the floors were nearly identical in shape, each company designed its space in its own unique way. On some floors, you'd find large open offices with rows of desks and computers. On others, there were quiet conference rooms behind glass walls, where meetings took place with the skyline in the background. Many executives had corner offices, the most desired spots on any floor. A corner office meant windows on two sides, more light, and a much wider view than anyone else had. It was a sign of status. If you got a corner office here, it meant you had made it. From these rooms, you could look out over Manhattan, the Hudson River, and even into New Jersey on clear days. On some evenings, people would pause their work just to watch the sunset reflect off the other skyscrapers. But we're not done yet. We can go even higher, and that's exactly what we're about to do. The elevator climbs past one floor after another. We're now 1,000 feet or about 300 meters above the ground, higher than most buildings in the city. But then, suddenly, everything stops. The elevator shakes a little, the lights go out, and suddenly, we're stuck in silence. So what happens if an elevator breaks down when you're this high in the air? To understand that, we need to go to the secret floors I mentioned earlier. No one was allowed inside them, and most people didn't even know they existed. But we're about to enter them. As you can see, they were filled with machinery. These were the mechanical floors, and they were essential to the towers. And these weren't only here. About every 30 floors, the towers had large mechanical levels that were never open to the public. Without them, the buildings couldn't have supported their height, their air conditioning systems, and this giant antenna on top of the North Tower. What was even the purpose of that thing? And why did both towers have helipads that were never used after 1977? But first, there's one more thing that depended on these mechanical floors. Something important I haven't told you yet. They're elevators. So when the elevator was shut down, that's when the mechanical floors become your only hope. The towers actually had a smart safety system. If an elevator had a problem, it didn't just stay stuck. It was programmed to return automatically to the nearest sky lobby below, where passengers could safely exit and switch to another elevator. But what if the elevator didn't stop and you kept going all the way to the upper floors? Then things started to get really interesting. Above the second sky lobby, the towers continued with more offices, but these weren't ordinary workplaces. Many of the upper floors were rented by major banks, investment firms, and international companies. Working here meant doing your job in the clouds, but the best was still above us. On the 107th floor of the South Tower, there was an indoor observation deck. And not only that, there were even 2 fast food restaurants, Sbarro Street Station, a pizza place, and Nathan's Famous Hot Dogs. Meanwhile, on the same floor in the North Tower, there was something completely different, something magical. But before we go there, we need to go even higher, to the very top of the South Tower, because it didn't just have an indoor observation deck. You could actually go outside as well. On the roof, 1,362 feet or 415 meters above the city, there was an outdoor observation deck. Here, you could step out into the open air and walk around a circular platform. The wind was strong, but the view was unbelievable. You could see everything. All of New York looked tiny. From up here, you could also see something strange. A helipad. It was there, right on the roof, but almost nobody ever used it. So why build a helipad that no one lands on? But first, here's the real question. If the South Tower had all of this, what did the North Tower have to beat it? At the very top of the North Tower was something unlike anything else on Earth, a restaurant called Windows on the World. People didn't come here just to eat, they came to feel what it was like to dine above the clouds. In the year 2000, it reportedly earned $37 million, making it the top-earning restaurant in the US at the time. So what would a 3-course dinner cost up here? And why could you get sick after eating it? You might not notice it at first, but if you were sitting by the window, you could feel the building move a little. And after a full dinner, your stomach would feel it too. Tall buildings don't stand perfectly still. Because of their height, they are designed to move slightly in the wind. If they didn't, they would crack under pressure. So at the very top of the North Tower, the building could sway a foot from side to side on windy days. You couldn't always see it, but people who were sensitive to motion could feel it. So what exactly would dining here cost? Here's a recreated version of the original menu guests received. Back then, around $40 to $60 was expensive for the time. But you weren't paying for food, you were paying for the only view like this in the world. The restaurant stretched across the 106th and 107th floors, and it wasn't only a fine dining restaurant. The complex also included a bar, a smaller restaurant, a wine school, as well as banquet and conference rooms. The restaurant also housed one of the largest wine collections in the world. More than 15,000 bottles were stored at the top of the tower, including rare vintages worth millions of dollars. Some of those wines no longer exist anywhere today. Above the restaurant was the roof of the North Tower. There was even a helipad, a platform where helicopters could land in an emergency. But strangely enough, it wasn't used. And how about the giant antenna, something millions of people saw, but almost nobody understood? Why was it there? What did it do? Well, it transmitted television and radio signals across the region. And on the 110th floor, there was broadcast equipment used by many TV and radio stations. Now we're coming to the last mystery, the helipads. On paper, it looked like a great idea, a place where helicopters could land in case something went wrong. So why was it almost never used? The truth is, the roof simply wasn't safe. It wasn't a flat, open surface like you might imagine. There were obstacles like the antenna that made landing a helicopter incredibly risky. At this height, the wind around the towers was powerful and unpredictable, the kind of wind that could push a helicopter off balance in seconds. So the helipad never met the official safety rules needed for regular helicopter landings. On top of that, the doors to the roof were locked, and only a few workers had access to it, which meant even if a helicopter could land, getting people there in time would be almost impossible. So the helipad remained almost completely unused. It was a feature that existed in theory, but not in practice. If you want more videos like this, just click the one on your screen now.